Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and now of Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. As always, we've got our producer, Justin Stein, with us. And today we've got something a little bit different than our typical in-season routine. We're going all Kansas City Chiefs with Adam Teicher of ESPN. He's their NFL Nation reporter for the Kansas City Chiefs. And more importantly, he is the author of the book, Kingdom: How Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and the Kansas City Chiefs Returned to Super Bowl Glory. So definitely check that out wherever you buy books. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. How are we all doing today?
Good.
You know, Wednesday afternoon football, as we record this, we all have to pause the game in the background. Work first.
These teams are a little sloppier than the team you cover.
Yeah, but I've been doing the Chiefs for a while, and so this game looks a little familiar going back a few years with the Chiefs for sure.
This is the 2012 Chiefs.
Yeah, that was a bad Chiefs team for sure.
Saw your fair share of those for a while in there. But let's talk a little bit first off, because you wrote an excellent piece today on ESPN.com about Andy Reid. So let's start off there on a little bit of a more positive note. You mentioned burnt ends in the title of the article, and I can tell you from my scouting days that Andy Reid is famous for his platters of barbecue that he eats in Mobile every year. So I can only imagine what it's like in Kansas City. But what I loved about this article was the way that you described sort of the culture that he really cultivates. It starts with his personality, but it seems to really permeate through the team. What did you learn researching this article?
Well, a number of things. First of all, and this is what really struck me, guys couldn't wait to tell their stories about Andy Reid. It was like, thank you for asking me these questions. Thank you for letting me tell these stories. They felt that passionate about Andy Reid and his the way he coaches and how everybody loves to play for him. And, I knew some of these stories, but never really put them all together in one place. So it really was kind of an interesting look at behind the scenes reasons why the Chiefs, why so many people like to play for Andy Reid. You know, the Chiefs re-signed a number of their stars, of course, in the offseason, including Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, and Travis Kelce, as well as some lesser players. And, the Chiefs were offering a lot of things. There's some good draws. The chance to win a championship, some decent money. These things were all out there. But Andy Reid, getting the chance to play for Andy Reid was it was high on a lot of people's lists. And you think in terms of quarterbacks, sure, quarterbacks want to play for Andy Reid. He has a quarterback-friendly offense, and offensive skill players have a chance to put up big numbers for him. But it really struck me that the offensive linemen were sort of the ones who were most interested in playing for Andy Reid, or most like playing for Andy Reid. And maybe that's not surprising in that Andy Reid was once a lineman himself. So, they have that connection, but he just felt like they just felt like Andy Reid always put them, these linemen did, always put them in positions to succeed. And I heard that from other position players as well. So just seems to be on a roll right now for him with in that regard.
Yeah, that's striking to me, especially about him being a former lineman, because we think of all of these offensive gurus, and a lot of the times we think of the quarterback coaches and the skill position route to those positions. But there's nobody that knows the X's and O's better than him. And I think there's got to be something to be said for that, for doing it in a way that kind of makes all those big nasties happy. I think that even if you have a high-flying offense like the Chiefs, being able to kind of feed them a little bit, I think is something that's always going to be important there.
One more thing to add, hey, not that Andy Reid's not a great X and O guy. He is. I mean, that part of it, he's solid. But I feel like his strength really is in dealing with players. It's not necessarily the X and O part. That part of it's very good for Andy Reid. But I feel the way he relates to players and deals with players. I mean, so much of it being a successful head coach is managing 53 people and the personalities and putting it all together and staying on top of it. And I feel like Andy Reid is underrated in that regard.
Yeah, a guy that when I was in New Orleans, I learned from Sean Payton that you don't have to either be a jerk that gets things done or a nice guy that runs a loosey-goosey ship. Like there's a way that's in between, and it sounds like Andy Reid's really, really mastered that. All right, I want to talk about Tyreek Hill because we all saw the clip of him saying that he thought Mahomes was trash at first. And I'm curious to know, based on all your years in Kansas City, What has the development of Mahomes been like from your vantage point? Did you see something similar to that he came in and there was a steep learning curve from him?
There really wasn't. I mean, you could see the ability right off. I mean, it needed to be polished for sure, but there were some things right off the bat that led you to believe that there was a lot to work with here. And as a matter of fact, asking around a little bit about that comment, there's more people seem to think. Having to talk to Tyreek Hill about it, but a lot of people seem to think he was probably joking because they certainly didn't see that side of him. And if Tyreek Hill did see that side of him, there's probably no future for him in scouting. Let's put it that way. But you could tell right away with Mahomes that there was a lot of ability. And as a matter of fact, the Chiefs just couldn't wait to get him on the field. I mean, they were sort of committed his rookie season to Alex Smith. But that game, you remember the last game of that regular season in 2017, the Chiefs had clinched the AFC West and their playoff seed was set. They couldn't win or lose and hurt or climb up the seeding ladder. So they sat Alex Smith. They played Pat Mahomes in Denver against the Broncos. And you could see a lot of these things that the Chiefs had been seeing during practice during the week. I've had players tell me, defensive players particularly, how impressed they were with Mahomes as a rookie just in practice. Best scout team quarterback they've ever seen is the way a lot of players put it to me. So, yeah, I definitely think that Tyreek Hill better find another job after football other than scouting.
Yeah, I know Mahomes is renowned for like the passes off his back foot and from weird arm angles, and that when you think a play is over, he makes a pass from a position that you didn't think he could make a pass from. Was he doing that stuff in practice from the very beginning?
Yeah, the no-look stuff and the odd angles and all that stuff. Yeah, that was we got to see that in his rookie training camp, and I don't get to see a lot of regular season practice once the season begins, but I'm told that when he was playing on scout team, there was a lot of that stuff. The defensive players were often amazed. They talked about being abused by Pat Mahomes a lot of times in practice that way.
That's interesting. It feels like you sort of debunked Tyreek Hill video. Sounds like it might be some fake news there, so be careful. All right, I want to talk about some of the weapons on offense. Speaking of Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce is first in total points amongst tight ends this year. Tyreek Hill is first amongst receivers in total points this year. There's a question that came to mind for me that I wanted to pick your brain about, because being on the inside, sometimes things are a little bit different than they are from the outside vantage point. Which of those guys is more important to the Chiefs' success, in your opinion? Is there one of them that they could do without more than they could do without the other? I know it's sort of an impossible question, but.
Yeah, I've had people just talking to some people around the league who've kind of told me both. I've gotten both answers to that question. We had a little peek at the Chiefs without Tyreek Hill. Last year, he missed 4 or 5 games. You remember early in the season, he had that sternum injury. And so he missed 4 or 5 games, and the Chiefs basically went off without a hitch. I mean, they scored points. They had that huge game in Oakland early in the season last year without him, where Mahomes threw for almost 300 yards in one quarter. It was just an amazing thing to see. I feel like when Travis Kelce is rolling, it's almost impossible to beat the Chiefs. I feel like he's kind of the hub of this thing. That he really is the one who makes it go. Not that Tyreek Hill's skills are easy to duplicate either, because they're not, but I just feel like the Chiefs can fill in for him and maybe do some things for him with other people. But if Kelce's out of that lineup, and we have not seen that in quite a while. I mean, he's been remarkably durable and stays in the lineup. So we're guessing a little bit, but I just wonder really how that would go for the Chiefs without Kelce in there.
This is not a determination of player value, because a player doesn't control who his own backup is. But they do have a junior Tyreek Hill in McCole Hardman. They do not have a junior Travis Kelce.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Chiefs have put zero resources really into finding junior Travis Kelce. They haven't drafted a tight end in years, and even the last one they did was, I believe, a 5th-round draft choice. They've spent basically minimum money on free agents like Blake Bell and Ricky Seals-Jones and guys like that. So they've tried to develop some college basketball players, tried that a couple times with varying degrees of success. So the Chiefs really haven't even tried, and But as far as receiver, between spending on Sammy Watkins and drafting McCole Hardman, the Chiefs have tried at wide receiver for sure.
And as you guys both pointed out, you're correct. The numbers back up what you said. Just looking at the SIS on-off report, we can see, double-digit snaps each of the last 2 years, 92 snaps this season without Travis Kelce on the field. It's about 8 expected points added per 60 plays better with him on than off. Last year it was 10 expected points added per 60 plays better with him on than off. So there's definitely a difference that you see in the total team performance with and without Kelce on the field.
Yeah, that's not surprising. And I really do wonder what that would look like. Again, we have not seen that much, just play a few plays here and there during games. But if there was a stretch of a season or a whole season, I do wonder what this would look like.
That's interesting because you mentioned kind of the lack of tight end depth, not trying to fill somebody in there. And I hadn't thought. I was going to ask you what concerns you had. The Chiefs are looking as good as anybody right now in the league. I was going to ask you what concerns you had. Offensive line came to mind. The Daniel Sorensen question, I'm sure must percolate on Kansas City radio a whole bunch. But the Travis Kelce injury, his health, is not something, or lack thereof, is not something that I had thought of. What comes to mind? And Aaron, I'm curious to hear your opinion on this too. What concerns do you have for the Chiefs when it comes to making another Super Bowl run?
My first answer would be their clearest weakness is run defense. But the thing is, we've already seen what happens when they fall behind and the other team can run the ball on them. It doesn't matter because Mahomes just scores a bunch of points in only a half instead of in 4 quarters. So I don't know if that's as big a weakness as it seems like.
Yeah, and the Chiefs won a Super Bowl last year with a run defense that really wasn't very good for most, if not all, the year. They got to the AFC Championship and this close to a Super Bowl in 2018 with an even worse run defense. So, I don't feel like that is. But I do – it is on that side of the ball. And here's my thing with the Chiefs defensively. What do you guys trust with the Chiefs defensively right now? What do you feel like the Chiefs can count on from week to week defensively? I don't know that there's a whole lot in that category right now. I mean, they paid a lot of money to Chris Jones and to Frank Clark to rush the quarterback, and that's been a little bit spotty, more spotty than you'd like it right now. They had to send the extra people and really come with the blitz to get pressure on Tom Brady last week, and I feel like that's not sustainable. They did a pretty good job with that against Tampa Bay, but as you guys know, you live with the blitz. Eventually you're going to die by the blitz. Eventually somebody's going to beat that. So I just don't know what you can count on with the Chiefs defensively. The pass rush has not been very good, particularly with 4 guys. They're not very good in the red zone on defense. They're force very few 3-and-outs. They're one of the lower teams in the league in that regard. I just don't know what you can hang your hat on there, and I feel like that's got to turn around. There's got to be something there that they can say, okay, we can count on this week to week. I feel like there's a real danger in saying, okay, Pat, bail us out here. We need 50 today if we're going to win this game. I feel like they're playing with fire a little bit in that regard.
Yeah, that would be my feeling too. What I said about the Chiefs is that they seem to let teams hang around on them a little too long, especially these last couple weeks. The fact that Carolina got within 2 in the 4th quarter twice, the fact that the Raiders had a lead in the 4th quarter, the fact that Tampa Bay got within a touchdown in the 4th quarter, got within a field goal in the 4th quarter. The defense, it's not that it's a bad defense. I mean, for example, I think their cornerbacks are a little underrated.
I agree.
Breland and Darius Sneed, and they're good players, but they're not. There's no great players. The only great player on defense, really, I think, is Jones. And so it's like, can the defense come through? If there's ever a game that Mahomes doesn't play well, which never seems to happen, but if it ever happens, can the defense come through? Yeah,
I agree with that. And they going back to that Carolina game. I mean, they were playing with fire there. And I feel like Carolina's fatal flaw, I don't know if you guys saw that game, but they scored with, I can't remember, 2-3 minutes left, and they tried an onside kick with all 3 timeouts left. I felt like they should have kicked away there, and I thought that at the time, not not as the game developed and I saw what happened, because they stopped the Chiefs. They made the Chiefs go 3 and out, but they lost that, 30, 40 yards of field position. They would have been in position to kick that field goal, a lot better position to kick that field goal. They tried, I think it was 67 yards, I think, on the last kick of the game. It actually had the distance, but was way right. I feel like they would have made that kick had it been a lot shorter, and it would have been if they not onside kick. So I think Carolina maybe bailed them out a little bit there, and the Chiefs made that great game-winning drive the next week against the Raiders. But last week, it really took a great 4-minute drive from the Chiefs at the end of the game to keep the ball and not give it back to Tom Brady and the Bucs there at the end. The Chiefs really hadn't been good at closing out games, as Aaron, you mentioned. Their 4-minute drives had not been very good. They've not been good at finishing out games that way, but they were great against the Bucs. But who doesn't think that if they'd given the ball back to Tom Brady with a minute left, whatever, that he wouldn't have gotten them down against that defense in position to at least kick the game-tying field goal. And the Chiefs were really reeling on defense at that point of the game. I think needed to keep that ball away to ensure a victory. So my point in all this is that the margins have been kind of narrow for the Chiefs recently, and that's okay. They're winning the games, but a little too close for comfort, I think, in all these cases.
Right. It's interesting. We started off singing the praises of Andy Reid. It's easy to forget after the Super Bowl, the big criticism for Andy Reid a lot of the time had been game management sort of stuff, that was the part of the game that he really struggled with. So maybe there is something to that. Maybe there's something that can be done even on the offensive side that can help kind of prevent these nail biters from occurring. It's like if you're losing and Patrick Mahomes can do that, he might be able to do that when you're winning too. So,
although I will give Andy credit, he is a much better coach when it comes to fourth downs than he used to be. He's much more aggressive now, and he has the offense to make it work.
I'll give him credit too. Going back to the beginning, what we were saying a few minutes ago, if I could choose one, if your 4 main units are pass offense, pass defense, and rush
run offense and run defense, the one you want to be good is pass offense. Yes.
And then the one that you want to be worst at probably is rush defense if you had to choose. So kind of interesting there. All right, let's stay on the Chiefs defense for a second because Steve Spagnuolo is a guy that I go back with. He was in New Orleans with me for a year, and I know how cerebral his scheme is. I know that there's a lot of different zone concepts that he'll use, a lot of match coverages going on. Even for defensive linemen, it can be hard to play if you're not a really smart player because he'll have defensive ends drop. He'll do all sorts of different stunting and zone blitzing. And that's actually one thing I was more impressed with about last year's Super Bowl run for the Chiefs. I think that makes it even more impressive doing that in his first season. I'm curious how it's kind of gone longitudinally. Here we are a year and a half in to Steve Spagnuolo. It sounds like, there's nothing you can hang your hat on about it. But what do you see about the way that the defense is built right now? Are things coming together in a direction where maybe a lot of different things had to come together, but we're starting to get there? Or do you hear things like the players talk about how difficult the scheme is and people just not being able to sort of do what's being asked of them? What's the internal picture of that like?
Well, a number of things. First of all, I really haven't picked that up from players too much, but there are some instances where you wonder why certain guys aren't playing a little more, and maybe the biggest instance is a linebacker the Chiefs have by the name of Willie Gay. Willie was their second-round draft choice and is a fantastically athletic player who seems to be exactly what the Chiefs are looking for at those spots, at one of those spots, and he's hadn't had a lot of playing time this year. And I know Spagnuolo is really, I don't want to say nervous about playing rookies, but he really makes a rookie prove it before he's going to put him on the field. He's not going to guess about a guy, and it just hasn't been there, at least not consistently. There have been a couple of games where Gay has played and made some plays for the Chiefs, but it hasn't been there consistently. I think he was in for maybe one snap against the Bucs last week, so on defense. So that's kind of an instance where maybe that's a guy who's having a little trouble picking up what the Chiefs want him to do. It's clear the Chiefs don't trust him in all situations right now. But I'll go back to this when it comes to the Chiefs defensively. There's not one former first-round draft pick on that team defensively. There is not one. There was one earlier in the year, Taco Charlton, just kind of a situational pass rusher.
Does DeAndre
But other than that, this is not the most fantastically talented defensive team you're going to find. Chris Jones was a high second-round pick. You can maybe argue that Tyrann Mathieu was pushed down in the draft way back when because he got kicked off his team. And same thing about Frank Clark when he came out in the draft, that because he got kicked off his team. But I feel like maybe the Chiefs are achieving what they should from a talent perspective on defense. Clearly, where they spent a lot of their money is on the other side of the ball, and that's where their bread is buttered, so to speak. So I feel like, yeah, you could ask maybe Frank Clark to play better than he has this year for sure, and Chris Jones to be more productive than he's been this year for sure. But I feel like as a whole, the Chiefs are probably getting a lot out of this talent. I do feel that much.
Very interesting. All right, let's flip it around. Let's talk a little bit more offense. I want to talk running back, especially because there are a lot of people who listen to this podcast for fantasy advice. But what I'm really curious about is what we can expect from these running backs as when we get to the playoffs. What do you see the usage? How is it shaping up with Clyde Edwards-Helaire going from early in the season? I know he was miserable coming out of college in pass protection. And I've noticed throughout the year that they've been reticent to put him in those sorts of situations. What do you expect to see with the usage of Edwards-Helaire, Le'Veon Bell, and the rest of the Chiefs running back room?
Yeah, it's going to be Edwards-Helaire's game. I mean, he's the lead guy there, and I don't expect that to change to any great extent. There may be some games where Bell gets hot and he gets a little more work, but I think over the longer haul, it's going to be Edwards-Helaire, and he'll get most of the work. But you're right about the pass blocking. It's been a little rough at times, and that's why the Chiefs go to Darrell Williams, their third back. He plays a lot on third downs, and the Chiefs really trust him to be that protector there. So I feel like it's going to go like it's been. Mostly Edwards-Helaire. They'll look for spots with Le'Veon Bell, but Darrell Williams on third down, and I feel like they've kind of got this pattern going, and that's the way they'll stay.
Aaron, I see you nodding. That aligns with what you're seeing?
Yeah, they don't. I mean, Williams is in a lot, but they don't throw him a lot. He doesn't carry the ball a lot. He's in there for pass protection.
Yeah, no, it's funny when you think about it. You think about Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell, such good receivers, each of them, and yet the guy that's playing on third down is somebody that probably casual fans have barely even heard of him.
Yeah, that's the one place that Edwards-Helaire during training camp caught my eye was as a receiver. I thought, wow, he's going to maybe have a bigger impact as a receiver this year than as a runner, but not been the case. He's not had that kind of impact that I expected, and I expected Bell, once he came in, to have maybe a bigger impact as a receiver than as a runner, and that hasn't developed either.
And you think, oh, well, let's play both of them at the same time and split one out as a receiver. But you don't want to take any of the Chiefs' wide receivers off the field to do that. So you're not going to do that.
Yeah, you definitely that's probably not the Chiefs' best way to operate their offense. They've done that. I know it hasn't been often, but they've done that a handful of times at most, had both those guys on the field at the same time, but not often.
All right, I had one more that I wanted to talk about, and that's the offensive line. Hard to pick holes in the Kansas City offense. They're just so good offensively. Is there anything that has you concerned about the offensive line performance? I noticed just casually watching Chiefs games, the amount of drifting that you see Mahomes doing just seems to increase every week. Maybe that's Mahomes. We'll let him do his thing, and that's just fine. I think that's probably a good strategy. Do you have concerns about the offensive line? Is it markedly different from what it was last year to you?
I don't know about markedly different, but their best player is Mitch Schwartz, their right tackle, who's missed the last 6-7 games with bad back, and I do expect he'll be back at some point, but how well he'll play, I don't know. So that's been a little bit of an issue right there. That's another spot where the Chiefs, at least on the interior positions, really haven't put a lot of resources over the years. I mean, they're the guys who are starting for them now are Andrew Wiley. They picked him up off waivers. The center's Austin Reiter. They picked him up off waivers. The left guard has been Nick Allegretti, who was a 7th-round draft choice. So there's not a lot of resources the Chiefs are putting into their, at least the interior positions. Eric Fisher, of course, was the number 1 overall pick, and Schwartz, the Chiefs gave some pretty good money to when they re-signed him a year or two ago. The Chiefs have been very good about surrounding Mahomes with skill players. 2 years ago, when it looked like maybe an unnecessary move, they spent a lot of money on Sammy Watkins. And then last year, when they had Watkins and Hill, they spent their first draft pick on Cole Hardman. And then this year, they spent their first draft pick on a running back. They haven't done that kind of work on their offensive line. I think that's kind of, again, maybe the Chiefs are getting a little bit what they're paying for here. It's one of those deals where I think it's Mahomes, the running game, going to have to work around this a little bit.
Coming out of this kind of 30 minutes together, I'm even more whelmed at how much the Chiefs are really built around Mahomes and the weapons rather than the line and the defense, even more than that was already my perception. It sounds like you have that even stronger than it seems when you have that kind of inside view.
Yeah, I do feel like the Chiefs strong contenders certainly to win another Super Bowl, but I just wonder, are they asking too much of those guys, and Mahomes in particular? I felt like last year the defense was such a big part of what the Chiefs got done, what they accomplished last year, and I don't see that defense pitching in to the same extent this year. So are the Chiefs good enough to overcome that against a steady diet of good teams like they're going to see in the postseason? I guess we're about to find out here.
That's sort of how I feel. I feel like people talk about the Chiefs as if they're unstoppable, and they're really, really good, but they're not like a historically great team. And there are weaknesses. And even the offense, it's not like they score on every drive. Like, they have times where they get stopped. So they're really, really good. But I don't think they're unstoppable.
Yep, and we all know how hard it is to repeat. You get everybody's best shot every week. I think there's really something to that. It'll be interesting to see them come down the stretch. Hopefully they can find a way to get it together and make another run at things, because they're certainly fun to watch. That bye, I think, is going to be such a big deal. Only one bye this year. Man, that looms large. All right. Well, thank you, Adam. Let's sign off and get out of here. All the listeners, please remember to subscribe, rate, review, tell your friends about the Off the Charts Football Podcast. Adam, where can the listeners find your book?
Anywhere books are sold. They can get it online at triumphbooks.com, which is the publisher. They can get it at barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com. Anywhere books are sold, you can find Kingdom.
There you go, everybody. That's Kingdom, How Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and the Kansas City Chiefs Return to Super Bowl Glory by Adam Teicher. Aaron, before we sign off and get out of here, the footballoutsiders.com. What can the people read this week?
Good discussion at Scramble for the Ball about opening coach seats, like coaches that have been fired, coaches that might be fired, and which is the best place to get hired out of all of the open coach seats that are likely to be open in the offseason. We thought with COVID that there would be fewer changes than usual because, the difficulty of bringing people in to interview, but we've already had 3 teams get rid of their coach and a 4th get rid of their GM. So there's going to be a lot of changes this offseason.
I say between Deshaun Watson on the good side and the lack of draft picks on the bad side, could there be a more ambivalent job opening than the Houston Texans?
Yeah, it's absolutely questionable. It's weirdly questionable. It's interesting because they talked about if Chicago comes open, Chicago may end up the best team that gets rid of its coach, but the worst opening because you don't want to be tied to that confusing quarterback situation, and they don't necessarily have a lot of draft capital.
So you want to have the Deshaun Watson and then everything else from the Bears,
the Jaguars have a lot of draft capital. That's actually a reasonably good one, and the Jets are probably going to get Trevor Lawrence, so that's a reasonably good one.
The Falcons are interesting too. All right, on Sports Info Solutions, you can find us on Twitter. We're at sportsinfo_SIS. Remember to check out the free SIS Data Hub. You can find some of these cool advanced stats that they're quoting on here at sisdatahub.com. That's all totally free. And then there's a paid version at pro.sysdatahub.com for the hardcore of hardcore. For my co-host, Aaron Schatz, our guest, Adam Teicher, and our producer, Justin Stein, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.